is the included offence is 10 years or more, but less than 14 years, and life if the maximum term of imprisonment for the included offence is 14 years or more, and up to imprisonment for life.
Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. We've got an exciting show today because what's happening right now here in Ottawa is exactly what I have been predicting would happen with these censorship bills. And this is dangerous. And it's like the Conservative opposition has finally woken up to how serious this is. There's been some great work done by Member of Parliament Andrew Lawton on this work, and we'll be looking at that. But Pierre Poilievre has realized, because the Bloc is joining with the Liberals to make sure this bill goes after our religious freedom in this country. No religious exemption for hate crimes. There shouldn't be hate crimes to begin with. Anyway, I'm saying too much right now. We'll be back mere moments with more of the show. Thank you for joining me this morning.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm broadcasting to you live from Ottawa. This is your host, David Krayden. Before we get into the latest wrinkle to these hate crime bills that are coming up, and by the way, I want to reiterate, we should not have hate crimes bills, any hate crimes legislation on the books in Canada, because it's a blatant and gross violation of free speech. Hate crimes can be interpreted as any government wants to interpret it. I don't want Marc Carney deciding what a hate crime is, what hate speech is. I don't want the Liberal government. I don't want any government deciding what hate speech is, what constitutes hate speech. Before we get there, though, let's talk about how the Liberals are again failing the Canadian economy, this time with steel.
Algoma announced it's laying off 1,000 steel workers, nearly a third of its workforce in the Soo. Our thoughts are with them. The Prime Minister looked them in the eye and promised he would protect their jobs, that he would negotiate a win, and I quote, have a deal by July 21st, but it was a bait and switch that is costing people their livelihoods. On top of that, Liberals are hammering the steel mill with a higher industrial carbon tax. Isn't it bad enough that the Prime Minister broke his promise on trade? Why is he going ahead with an industrial carbon tax that will kill even more steel jobs?
Obviously, our thoughts are with the workers affected by the unjustified and unjustifiable tariffs imposed by the White House, and we'll continue to work with them. As Algoma Steel is going through a difficult situation, to say the least. Mr. Speaker, my team and I have been in contact with Algoma's leadership team. We absolutely have every confidence in the Algoma workers as they're going through this hardship, and we will make sure that we support them as they're developing new products and also accessing new markets. We'll fight for these jobs, Mr. Speaker.
So they have every confidence in what? The workers are going to be taking this the right way? The workers can handle losing their jobs? The workers can handle unemployment? No. Melanie Joly, another classic moment with the Minister of Industry. And this is absolutely what you'd expect from this Liberal government. Remember this picture here? Remember this. Here's Marc Carney at Algoma Steel. And, of course, he's got the potted plants behind him, otherwise known as the workers who were forced to stand behind Marc Carney and look like they're very enthusiastic about Marc Carney. Wearing a hard hat, probably for the first time in his life, doesn't really fit well. None of this fits well. This is all very, very unnerving, shall we say? Because you know Marc Carney is after business for himself. We'll show you something that we discovered on X yesterday in a minute here, as soon as we discuss a little more about the steel problem here.
Large polluters pay, and so what happens?
But does that not ultimately trickle down?
No, because what the big companies are producing, by and large, are not products that we are consuming. There's some element of that, but by and large, a steel company, how much steel are you using these days, Todd? I mean, not as much we used. So anyway, so that's how much steel are you using these days, Todd?
Yeah, it's worth reminding everybody that's how Marc Carney talked when he first entered the political spectrum in January of this year. Nobody uses steel anymore. We made fun of that. And of course, that was Marc Carney number one. We first met him, former governor of the Bank of Canada, former governor of the Bank of England, green lobbyist. That was who we met. But Marc Carney has continued to absolutely fail Canadians.
I mentioned earlier, $500 million loan to Algoma in September. How can that kind of money be laid out by governments and thus taxpayers, and we see these really significant job losses so soon after? Mayor Matthew Shoemaker joins me now. Hi there.
So you just heard that. They're laying out all this taxpayer money, and we're still huge job losses. Oh, it's all about the tariff. Yes. Wait. I'm just waiting to hear.
Mayor, thank you for making time on a difficult day. 1,000 workers who have gotten these layoff notices. The notice is coming just before the holidays, although the layoffs don't take effect until later. What are you saying to people who are directly affected by this?
It's a tough day, obviously, in Sault Ste. Marie, and I've been trying to convey to the community that these are our family members that need our support, and we're going to be there to support them through this challenging time. We're going to make sure that we do everything we can to try and reduce the impact or mitigate the impact that these job losses are going to have on each family and on the community as a whole.
I saw a quote from one of the local union representatives who was saying that they still have questions about how permanent these layoffs are. Is that a question in your mind, or are these jobs clearly lost for at least a great length of time?
We believe that the indefiniteness of the layoffs is a sign that these jobs are likely not to come back.
Okay. And when it comes to the cause, we've mentioned Algoma has pointed to the U.S. tariffs. To your mind, is this entirely at the feet of Donald Trump?
Well, the transition to electric arc steelmaking was going to reduce the workforce eventually. I think the original timeline was end of 26, mid 2027. But I think that the reality is much of that may have been able to have been done by retirements, by adding new capacity, which would have otherwise kept the need for employees higher. But the tariffs has really wiped all of that off the map of possibilities, and we are left facing a company that doesn't have a market for 60% of its product, which is what they used to ship down to the U.S., and that we desperately need a tariff deal negotiated and resolved in order to get that market.
Help us understand. I mentioned earlier $500 million loan to Algoma in September. How can that kind of money be laid out by governments and thus taxpayers, and we see these really significant job losses so soon after?
I think that's a legitimate question, one that should be asked of the provincial and federal governments. I do suspect that without that funding, the job losses might be even more significant. So I think that any support the federal and provincial government can give to the steel plant is important to make it sustainable for our community. And so that's why at the time, I celebrated that news as welcome news. Without it, I fear that the job losses would have been greater.
Do you think in this current trade environment, it is conceivable to have government say to big steel producers like Algoma, if we're going to give you these big loans, you can't make significant layoffs?
I think it's conceivable if the loans are of such a nature or in such a quantum that they would, sustain the operations the way they were pre-tariff. That's what I don't think the loans did in September. And so I think that's a legitimate question for the federal and provincial governments and for the company.
I think it's a limit too. How much is it going to cost? $1 billion every month. Element deal. You cannot do all this. That word has been the strategy from day one. And Carney, I think because they just finally a broader relation that censorship bill did target people. Faith, blah, but you think should be seen how concept they sort of the NFL institution and all and the buck so inside with Marc and they would take away our riches. So do you think these laws you bet religious entity
saw a church burning in Canada, a tragic incident at a church in Michigan, and over 100 incidents of church burning or vandalism since 2021 in Canada.
Yes.
What do you make of the sectarian strife seen targeting towards Christians? Do you think the government's doing enough to combat this, and what would you do?
I think it's terrible. No, the government is not doing enough, and I would do a lot more. So let's recap where we are. 100 churches have been burned. You hear almost nothing from the Liberal government about this. Christians may be the number one group that is victims of hate-based violence. But of course, it's not politically correct to say that. 100 terrorist attacks against Canadian churches. This anti-Christian hate has got to stop. We've seen with this Liberal government is the number of things they've done to allow this. One, they've separated people into groups. Their ideology seeks to identity politics divides one group against another, and then we're surprised when that leads to violence. Two, the Liberals have reduced criminal penalties for arson, so people are not afraid to get caught burning things down anymore. And three, they have failed to put law enforcement resources where they belong, which is to say going after criminals rather than targeting farmers, duck hunters, and professional sports shooters. So Conservatives would take exactly the opposite approach. We would bring in mandatory prison sentences for extortionists. We would crack down on hate crime, which is more than doubled under the Liberals, with tougher laws that throw criminals in prison. We used to make sure that the foreign criminals that are in our country illegally are kicked out of Canada. And we would redirect resources away from banning duck hunters, farmers, and sports shooters towards more police and border services that will keep all Canadians safe. Because frankly, Canadians of all faiths, including Christians, deserve to worship in peace. Thank you.
But of course, we're not going to get that peace. And this is why we need to fight back in a huge way against these bills. And guess who's back at the cabinet table after being mercifully left out of the last cabinet list of appointees? Yeah, it's Marc Miller, buddies, the good buddy of Justin Trudeau. Marc Miller is back in cabinet. He's replacing, Stephen Guilbeault, who of course resigned because he thinks this government's just not woke enough anymore. So Marc Miller is back, one of the most acerbic, one of the most bitter parliamentarians I have ever seen sit in the House of Commons. He is always making very, shall we say, low standard remarks about Pierre Poilievre and other people. And his remarks are so vicious, so visceral, so ugly, that's really what Marc Miller is remembered for, as well as being an incompetent cabinet minister. But here's Marc Miller as the new minister of, used to be called heritage. Now it's culture and identity, or identity and culture. I think it's that one. And that, of course, means identity politics. He's the minister of identity politics. And Marc Miller wants to make the Bible illegal. You think I'm not kidding. That's the end game here. Or else it's going to be ripped to pieces. So the offending portions that Marc Miller doesn't like cannot be read, seen, or declared.
Literally invoking a passage from, in this case, the Bible, but there are other religious texts that say the same thing, and somehow say that this is good faith. I mean, clearly there are situations in these texts where these statements are hateful. They should not be used to invoke or be a defense, and there should perhaps be discretion for prosecutors to press charges. I just want to understand what your notion of good faith is in this context, where there are clearly passages in religious texts that are clearly hateful.
Once again, clearly to whom? Clearly to Marc Miller, clearly to the Liberal government. And that's what we're up against here. All of these censorship laws are flawed. It's not just because they want to take the religious exemption out of these hate speech legislation pieces. They're inherently evil. There's nothing that can make these laws good. Even if put the religious exemption back in or keep it in, it's still not going to make these good laws. They're just even worse now with religious exemption being taken out of them. Now, thank God there's one MP at least who's been fighting hard against this, and that's Andrew Lawton. And let's listen to what Andrew has to say.
The House of Commons Justice Committee is set to meet this afternoon. Now, this is going to shock you. What the Liberals are trying to do is ram through their censorship bill, C-9. This is their so-called anti-hate bill, which the Minister of Justice admits will allow people to be criminally prosecuted for what they post online, bringing in UK-style tweet policing to Canada. The Liberals just want us to wave this through. They want us to give them a rubber stamp, a green light to make this law as quickly as possible, even though we have not had the opportunity to do the proper scrutiny of this bill that parliamentarians are supposed to be able to do. So just to take a step back here, we were supposed to have 5 meetings where we would hear from witnesses who would bring forward their concerns. We had suggested a number of witnesses representing civil liberties groups on the left and right. And 2 of the meetings on this, the last 2 weeks, the Liberals have filibustered it, so we have not gotten to actually hear from the witnesses. Now, why were they filibustering it? It actually has nothing to do with Bill C-9. It was because the Liberals were too busy not wanting to support the Conservative motion condemning light jail sentences for people who traffic in child sexual abuse and exploitation material. The Liberals should have just agreed to that motion, standing up for children, and then we could have gotten back on with our work on C-9. But that didn't happen. So here we are. We have been denied 2 critical meetings, 6 hours of witness testimony, and today the Liberals expect that we're just going to be able to put a big check mark beside C-9, a bill that civil liberties groups have said should send a chill, and does actually chill, free speech in Canada. So we are not going to let that happen. I'm going into this committee room and I'm going to tell the Liberals that we need to be focused on the actual justice priorities that Canadians have identified. Let's get back to our bail study. Police, cities, provinces, they've all been speaking up saying that cities and communities and streets do not feel safe. We have bail legislation that the Liberal government says will answer these problems, and for some reason they're too hung up on wanting to censor what people are saying online rather than actually discussing bail and sentencing reform. So what we're going to do is say that this committee should actually be allowed to do its work properly, and on Bill C-9, we should not even entertain passing this bill through committee until we've had the opportunity to hear from all of the witnesses who want to testify. So stay tuned. Justice Committee today starts at 3:30 p.m.
Now, and what happened in that committee? Here's a member of parliament at work here. And once again, there should be a lot more pushback on this bill, but at least somebody is pushing back. And I've said now for months, if this bill and other bills like it are allowed to stand, free speech is effectively over in Canada. And you say that repeatedly, I say it every day, and people just seem to think, well, we've been through this before. No, we're at the point of no return with these laws. And let's listen to some of this testimony.
We could have had more witness testimony. We could have had more insights had the Liberals not decided that 1 year was too cruel and unusual a punishment for people who traffic in child sexual exploitation and abuse material. And I find it shocking that that was what they decided was their hill to die on. Well, my hill to die on is freedom of expression. And this Liberal government has shown reckless disregard for that. When we engage in work as committee, we are the gatekeepers between law that has not been scrutinized, has not been vetted, has not been analyzed, and things that are passed by this House of Commons. When you try to aggressively and wrongfully accelerate the committee process, what you are doing is denying Canadians the opportunity to improve bad law or to, in some cases, gut terrible law. So when you try to speed up that process, it is either because you do not care what Canadians have to say, or more importantly, you know what they're going to say. And this is precisely what's happening on Bill C-9.
So do you think the Conservatives will be effective in doing this? I doubt it very much, because the Liberals only need the Bloc. In fact, they only need the New Democratic Party. I don't know how many champions of free speech are left in the New Democratic Party. At one time, there were champions of free speech in that party. I think of people like, I'm going back a long way, Ed Broadbent, maybe even Jack Layton, I think, had more of a sense of free speech than what that party has today, which is just a sense of wokeness. Eternal wokeness defines the New Democratic Party, and it will be supporting this bill, I can almost guarantee you. And clearly the Bloc Québécois is salivating at the opportunity of clamping down on free speech in Quebec. They just love the idea. So is Sean Fraser, Attorney General / Justice Minister Sean Fraser. You remember, he's the guy in the House constantly looking like he wants to fly, flapping his arms about during question period. One of the most incompetent ministers of the Trudeau years as housing minister, as immigration minister. Now he is overseeing the censorship and surveillance bills. And as I said yesterday, wait for it this week. It's only Tuesday. Wait for it. The Online Harms Act, it will be rearing its ugly head any day now, because they're running out of time before the fall session ends and they all go on their Christmas break. They're running out of time. And Sean Fraser has promised to introduce this bill in the fall session. Take him at his word. So one thing you can take a Liberal at his word for, it's that more tyranny, more oppression is coming. That's what you can set your watch by that. Here's Sean Fraser with his reassuring words.
Offense is 5 years or more, but less than 10 years. 14 years if the maximum term of imprisonment is the included offense is 10 years or more, but less than 14 years, and life if the maximum term of imprisonment for the included offense is 14 years or more, and up to imprisonment for life. Okay, so sorry, what is there a question?
So that's Sean Fraser explaining or mansplaining all of the potential sentencing that could go with the hate crime legislation that's coming up here. We've already know you can get life in prison, $100,000 fine under the Online Harms Act. Can also happen under Bill C-9. So they've got lots of options now.
Oh yeah, you want to know each of the different sentencing guidelines? That'd be nice. Yeah, sure. So let me flip open to the specific page. What's that? Oh, just on symbols. Yeah, so I think we're dealing with a two-year penalty. So sorry, I'm looking at different things. Let me deal with the hate penalty first. So if you're found guilty of an indictable offense, a maximum penalty under the hate crime, it will be a 5 years. If the maximum term of imprisonment for the included offense is 2 years or more, but less than 5 years. 10 years if the maximum term of imprisonment is included offense is 5 years or more, but less than 10 years. 14 years if the maximum term of imprisonment is the included offense is 10 years or more, but less than 14 years. And life if the maximum term of imprisonment for the included offense is 14 years or more, and up to imprisonment for life. Intimidation, where are we here? Would be, if you're guilty of an indictable offense, you'd be liable to imprisonment for a term of not more than 10 years. I've now skipped past the hate symbols piece. My apologies. For the punishment, everyone who commits an offense under the relevant section is guilty of an indictable offense and liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years, or is guilty of an offense punishable on summary conviction, where there'd obviously be discretion.
So it's nice to see Sean has such a grip on the legislation there. Clearly, he hadn't even read it at that point. I don't know if he has today. You know, and we also have, there's another Conservative MP who's been up talking about this, and that's Calgary Nose Hill Conservative MP Michelle Rempel Garner, who at least still has a great sense of what free speech is. And she has been attacking Bill C-9 for this. The bill itself seeks to create new offenses around the intimidation and obstruction of sites used by an identifiable group, such as a religious or cultural center, as well as make it a crime to promote hate by displaying hate symbols like a swastika or those linked to listed terrorism entities. The proposed amendments come amid widespread criticism of both the Liberals' bill and the Canadian Civil Liberties Association and the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council, calling it for it to be withdrawn, along with dozens of advocacy groups. I wish there were more churches out there. How come the Muslim community, it always takes the lead with these things? Are Christians not at least a bit concerned about the Bible being banned? Muslims are clearly concerned that this could be aimed at their faith, at their Quran. But Christians still don't seem to realize the extent of the danger. Not, at least there are a few who fought back during the mandates, but there's not enough. And thank you, Michelle, for doing that, for keeping that in. Now, before we get to some breaking news on X, I just wanted to share a couple of things with you. And this, of course, I love to share these with you. I just received this picture yesterday. This is from Sharon Borson. Thank you, Sharon, for buying one of our Ostrich hoodies. This is the gray version. Fantastic. And remember, these are still for sale. And let's have a look at the merchandise video, and we'll be right back. And of course, we've got, let me show you a few more of these, because we're so proud of these. And these, of course, are the Ostrich stickers again. And that's, Sharon was wearing one of these. And we're so proud of these, because we're not just promoting righteousness with these. We are demanding that the CFIA be prosecuted, charged for their occupation of Universal Ostrich Farms. We will not relent. We will not give up until we get some action on this. This is something, and we're going to show you Katie's latest Facebook presentation where she talks about the dangers of misinformation coming from the CFIA and its bots. But we'll come back to that in a minute. I just want to share let's share X with you now, because there's some incredible things going on right now, and I want to get into that. Yeah, and we'll show you Katie's latest in a minute here. But this is incredible. The con man Zelensky is being outed, yet skid Marc Carney just gave him $4 billion, which corresponds with Critteraid, otherwise known as Brookfield Asset Management, getting a $4 billion Ukraine rebuilding contract. The stench of corruption in Kiev is thick. Isn't that incredible? How it's just like they give you public money with one hand, and the public money is returned to the private sector, but a private sector that's owned or controlled or managed or governed by Marc Carney. How long can we absolutely put up with this depth of corruption? And of course, here's the question. What Tracy Wilson asked us about the steel question. How is it even possible? Shouldn't we have huge demand for steel with all the infrastructure programs you guys are promising? Aren't you building, quote unquote, Canada at unimaginable speed, quote unquote? You gave Algoma $400 million, and now you'll provide supports from the taxpayers. Does it have something to do with the industrial carbon tax? I ask again. Pierre Poilievre has pointed this out. Marc Carney didn't think anyone is even using steel anymore. So stop blaming the tariffs. I don't understand these layoffs at Algoma. They lost a lot of business in America, no doubt, but we are apparently going to be building at a rapid speed, and we have no choice but to use Canadian steel. Algoma also has access to almost endless government subsidies. Yeah, very good friends of the Marc Carney government. Yeah, and I want to get to this because this is incredible. And thank you to Jasmine Lane, because she has read Marc Carney's books very carefully. I can tell you that. She has the patience. Good for you, Jasmine. Here's Marc Carney's book where he says he needs $2 trillion in, quote, new capital, unquote, to change the economy and enrich himself through his, quote, blind trust, unquote, with Brookfield. Jasmine Lane found it. Coincidentally, that is the exact amount Carney says is in the Canadian pension he is using. And he's going after CPCP and public service pension plans. $2 trillion. This is the game he's playing. Well, there's the evidence. That's in his book, Values. What's $2 trillion to these parasites? Yeah, and I love this one from Lori. Stephen Guilbeault admits the Liberal government's climate goals are unachievable. Who would have thought? After spending more than $200 billion on unrealistic targets, it's a sad reality of politics that cabinet ministers can only tell the truth once they're out of cabinet. Well, Stephen, thank you for having an honest moment. And so that's where we are. I love this one here. Are Canadians going to stand by while the Liberal government passes C-9, effectively implementing the chilling censorship we see in the UK, where 14,000 people per year have police come to the door and arrest them, and 4,000 are currently in jail for non-violent promoting? Yeah, I think they love to call these keyboard words. Promoting posts that someone else says makes them feel unsafe. This is an old playbook to muzzle free speech, so authoritarian governments can pass legislation unopposed by their citizens to take away all of their rights and freedoms. Look back in history, and every communist or fascist government has done this first. We can't let this happen. Thank you, Matthew Polly, for that. I think that's dead on. We are in grave trouble here, folks. We are in grave trouble. And I can't overemphasize how serious this is. Now, I want to show you Katie Pasitne's latest Facebook post, because a lot of people are asking me, hey, isn't John Casamidis going to pay all their legal bills? Aren't they getting all kinds of money from American billionaires? No, they're not. They have gotten $35,000 from all of these foreign supporters. And people who ask me, isn't this covered? No, it's not covered. This is why they have to fundraise. This is why they have to raise more money. And Katie talks about how she continues to be maligned and how the farm continues to be maligned for not following the rules. Not true.
Hi everyone, it's Katie with Universal Ostrich. I think one thing that we should discuss is when this all began and Canadian Food Inspection Agency found out, or the anonymous tip came in about our farm. So initially, we called our vet when we had illness. The symptoms presented themselves just like they did when we had the same symptoms in 2020. At that time, our vet took samples and that came back positive for Pseudomonas bacteria. Pseudomonas bacteria is not reportable to the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So in December, when we had the same symptoms, we contacted our vet, as much as Canadian Food Inspection Agency wants to say we didn't. It is in our tribunal call logs with Canadian Food Inspection Agency where they discuss that they know we contacted our vet and that we were waiting to hear back from our vet. In those call logs, they also say that if our own vet thought that it was avian influenza, then to get our own vet to contact Canadian Food Inspection Agency. I just think that this is very important for people to understand. When Canadian Food Inspection Agency called us due to an anonymous tip, we were extremely cooperative because absolutely was not on our radar that it could be avian influenza. We thought it was Pseudomonas bacteria. So with that disinformation, I want to make that part very clear. It is in our own tribunal call logs with Canadian Food Inspection Agency that they know that we already contacted our vet. And we were just waiting to hear back from him because it was through the holidays. So it was harder to get a hold of the vet. One thing I think we need to be extremely concerned about is that anonymous calls can bring Canadian Food Inspection Agency to your door, and based off suspicion, Canadian Food Inspection Agency can kill every animal that you own. So if you have a disgruntled neighbor that's upset with your rooster crowing every morning, they can call Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and Canadian Food Inspection Agency could say that there was an anonymous tip, somebody was sure that you have avian influenza, and that would give them enough authority to come and kill every animal you own. So I just think that that's a very important piece to put out there. It's been 25 days since we had one of the biggest bloodsheds and inhumane killings in probably Canadian history on animals. And our hearts are still very broken, but we are piecing this all together. And the only reason we've been able to piece it together so well is because we've had the support and love of all of you. But this is a very big part of this whole story for everybody to really understand. So lots of love and light, and I just wanted to clear that up, and I send you all of our love from the farm, and we will continue with the updates as we have more. But again, based off suspicion, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency can kill every animal you own. The peacocks, I guess maybe we should touch base really quick on this. Critteraid, I am so happy that they get to keep their peacocks, and how they got to keep their peacocks is where we need to focus. They tested them. So it kind of is a little bit contradictive that we were unable to test any of the ostriches that were part of the mass slaughter on November 6th that Canada and all across the world had to witness and bear witness to, that has changed most of our lives forever. And so I'm very proud that they tested them. I'm so happy that those peacocks got to live. But what does that tell you about the actions of Canadian Food Inspection Agency on our farm on November 6th and 7th, when they were offered that the NIH and the FDA would do the testing, so they can't even use that they didn't have enough sources or resources. We offered to do the testing ourselves and handle the animals ourselves, so they can't even say that it would have been too difficult. Again, Canadian Food Inspection Agencies, what they're really good at is lying and misleading and killing. So again, I want to say how happy I am that these peacocks get to live, because they deserve that right. And they deserved the right to be tested before anything inhumane may have happened to them. But remember, that leads us into the question, then why were we not allowed to test our ostriches? So God bless every one of you. Thank you for standing with us. Love and light. And we're going to just continue along this journey of truth and advocacy for our farmers and a better future for our children, our grandchildren. And we're going to stay united because we're stronger together, and the world is going to continue to watch. So with all my love and all of our family's love, thank you for your prayers and your consistent, constant messaging of strength and hope. You are carrying us through some of our darkest days. So God bless every one of you. Thank you for being you. And together we will make the change that's necessary for our future generations.
Well, thank you, Katie. And once again, U.S. billionaires have paid $70,000, including John Catsimatidis, $70,000 for legal fees. That's not even covering the legal fees that farm had to go through up to this point. Now the farm is being asked to cover all of the legal fees from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. That's an order from the Supreme Court. There's no money left in the kitty for that. This is why they're continuing to fundraise and why I'm helping to do that. So I've had people ask me, aren't these bills covered? No, they're not. To make that quite clear. They're not, and this is why more fundraising is required at this time, and we'll continue to help out in any capacity we can in that regard. Thank you for watching today, folks. It's been a pleasure. This has been David Krayden broadcasting to you live from your nation's capital. We'll be back again with more of the news you need to know tomorrow. Thanks for watching today, friends. And please share this broadcast with your friends and family. Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I'm going to keep this station on the air. I'm going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David Krayden, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.